Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Today, State Auditor Allison Ball is here. The job has always been important and is designed in the state constitution to be an independent watchdog. In recent years, the legislature has shifted responsibilities, and this session, lawmakers looked at an efficiency panel to look into waste, fraud, and abuse within state government. That has apparently stalled. The auditor's office, though, is shaped by its incumbent in many ways. Quinn is remembered for high-profile performance audits that brought some major reforms. Allison Ball is a former state treasurer and bankruptcy attorney who directs her staff to look for problems and solutions. Auditor Ball is with us today, and we welcome her. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Your office has just released the first volume of the annual statewide single audit of Kentucky. You looked at $22 billion in taxpayers' money, and apparently found about $500 million in financial mistakes. What do Kentuckians need to know about their tax dollars?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that is a big audit that we do every year, and we always do it in two parts. So that first part was the one that was just released, and it is a big number. It's $500 million that we found mistakes on. Most of them were errors in the reporting or errors in the process for how it got there. And this is important because this is how we base our financial stability in Kentucky. It's how we have our bond rating for our credit rating, and so we can get things bonded. It's how businesses know that this is a good place to come to. It is very important because it represents our financial health. We have to get this right. So this presents the picture of how we're doing. The auditor's office reviews this, looks and see are our numbers correct, and as you just heard, we actually found that there were numbers that were not correct. So what this does is it identifies the problem and it fixes the problem. We also have found places where there's internal controls that are wrong, and we've told the different entities, okay, this is what you need to fix. This is important too because it also prevents against waste, fraud, and abuse. If you have internal controls that are wrong, that are not done with care and making sure everything's done right, then you're opening up for people to commit fraud or embezzlement.
What are we talking about when you say sufficient controls or internal controls?
Yeah, well, it can mean a lot of different things. It usually just means the steps that are in place to make sure the numbers are accurate. And if you have a breakdown in that, then you have someone who could be a bad actor who can come in and fudge the numbers or just slip a few things on the side. So these things do matter. You
don't say that you found any of that, right?
No, and that's the good news about this year is that we did not find any embezzlement or fraud in our review. It doesn't mean it hasn't happened because sometimes you dig deeper and further and you find out more things. But for our review at this point, we don't think that it rises to the level of being fraud, being embezzlement, being anything that's bad that results in criminal action.
You found some issues in the Finance and Administration Cabinet. Most of that, you say, has been corrected, and that is an area where some federal funds are also commingled with state money, right?
Yes, and that's a good thing to point out too, because that's one reason why this is important, because we get a lot of federal dollars, and we have a great responsibility when we're receiving federal dollars to make sure that we're accurate. If you don't, then you jeopardize the ability to receive federal dollars in the future.
You said the Kentucky Horse Park lacked controls of its financial situation. What did you find? And was that a situation that was concerning to you?
Sure. So that was one of those situations that was actually very similar to the other ones where there was a breakdown in some internal controls. Again, it was a mistake, and it was something that we caught. This is why the auditor comes in. The auditor comes in at the end to see, is there anything that needs to be corrected? And that's what we did. So we have corrected it. The SWAC audit that is released to the public, those are the numbers that you really look at, not the prior numbers where we're calculating everything and receiving information from different entities. It's those final numbers. So Kentucky can rest and be assured to know that those final numbers, the ones that we reviewed, we've looked at, and we've corrected, those are the accurate numbers and those are the important ones.
You've said that you want to bring light and transparency to how tax dollars are spent and also find solutions when there are mistakes or problems. Are you getting cooperation to head toward that result?
You know, a lot of instances we do have cooperation, and I'm so grateful when it works out that way. That's usually what you want. I'm a big believer in making Kentucky better on all levels, and that means working with everybody. And in this last SWAC, I'm pleased to report that we've had conversations with everybody who's made mistakes, who needs to improve their internal controls, and everybody has been willing to make the adjustments they need to make.
Did you go into this job thinking you would find more issues with spending and fraud and abuse?
Sure. So we've just talked about SWAC, and SWAC is looking good right now. We've found the errors, we're correcting the errors, and things are going to be better for the future. That doesn't mean that's true for all the things that I've done. We have had serious instances of fraud or embezzlement, a variety of things, and I expected to find that kind of stuff going into it. I was a prosecutor for several years. I was in the Treasury for a number of years. I know that my job is to protect taxpayer dollars and to protect against waste, fraud, and abuse. So I came into this knowing that part of my job is rooting those things out.
Give us a scope of your office. You look throughout state government. You can also look at our public universities, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's correct. So a lot of times people will think the auditor is like the IRS, and they get a little nervous when I come around because they think I'm looking into what they've done on their taxes. And I can tell my friends and family, don't worry, I'm not coming after you, most likely. My job is to protect taxpayer dollars and also to make sure there's compliance with the law. So my authority is very broad. It is an audit of taxpayer dollars, making sure that those monies are used the correct way. It's not limited to dollars. We also, we balance the books and make sure things are done correctly, but we also can check compliance with the law. So it is broad, and it can include anything like universities. It also includes counties. It can include cities. It's anything that is using taxpayer dollars.
And if it's cities and counties, most of the time that is at request.
So
right?
Counties happen with regularity every year. Cities, just because of a bandwidth issue, we don't do all the cities in Kentucky. That is usually by request. Usually there's a tip or something that has given us a clue that we need to look a little bit deeper.
The General Assembly did pass anti-DEI legislation, and assume it survives a likely veto from the governor. The Attorney General would largely enforce it, but would your office also have responsibilities when it comes to watching the money?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in that bill that was just passed, the Auditor's Office does have a role to play in that. And again, it's about protecting taxpayer dollars. So the General Assembly has made some rules about what's permitted and what's not permitted at the university level. And it's the then executive's job to enforce those rules. So we do have a role to look into it and see, making sure that money is not being expended to operate a DEI office or something like that.
All right, so this has come up as a question. What if student groups who may be supported by student fees that are collected as part of their tuition paid to a school want to hold diversity events or outreach events? Would that be legal under the statute?
That's a great question, and I need to dig into the statute with more specificity to look into some of those very individual situations. But my understanding is students are permitted to do a lot of things because there's free speech rights that are implemented there. So my understanding is that students have a lot more leeway than taxpayer dollars.
Senate Bill 257 would have established a sort of Kentucky Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. That appears to have stalled in the House. It got through the Senate with some enthusiasm, but you testified in support of it. What would it do that your office doesn't already do?
So that is a very sophisticated answer, or a very sophisticated question, because what you probably recognized is it's about performance audits. And our office has done performance audits in the past. I have wanted to reinstate performance audits. It's a power that I have. It's just a resource problem, and we've not had the staffing to be able to do performance audits. So I was supportive of this. I'm always excited about something that increases efforts to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. That's what my core function of my job is. That's my goal in my time in office. So I'm always excited about anything that focuses on my ability to do that. This would not have added anything new. It just would have made sure that it happens. Right now, we're not doing performance audits. I would like to. I intend to ask the next General Assembly to give me some extra money so I can do this. It is a goal of mine. This just would have made it more likely to make it easier to happen.
Let's spell out for our viewers what a performance audit is.
Sure, and that is a great question. So what this would do is it's making sure you're getting what you're paying for. So basically, what you're bang for your buck. It's about efficiency, making sure that what the government is spending its monies on is actually getting that. So it's a great use of the Auditor's Office. Auditor Crit Llewellyn used it extensively and had great results doing that. We have a history of doing it, and it's something that I would like to continue in the future.
She also followed if there was any state money that went into an entity, then that was within her scope. And so, as you remember, there were audits at the airport and League of Cities and other organizations over the years that she was in office.
Yes, I agree with that position. And if you look at the law as it's developed regarding the Auditor's Office, it is quite broad. And it should be, because it's about protecting those taxpayer dollars wherever they've ended up.
So that is to see that they're performing the mission that they're set out to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had a bit of a standoff, we'll say, with the Beshear administration over access to a database about children who are in foster care. You said the ombudsman needed the data to look into problems. The administration cited privacy concerns and said at that time it was illegal. That has been resolved now.
That has been resolved. So to make a very long story short, the Ombudsman's office used to be a part of the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, and that's the entity that acts like an auditor for the public. So if you've got a foster care situation, maybe a situation involving an elder abuse situation, you can go to the Ombudsman to make sure the Cabinet is doing what it's supposed to do. Last year, the General Assembly moved that under the umbrella of the Auditor's Office, but we had a snag, and the snag was the Cabinet did not allow access to the iTwist database. That's the child abuse and adult abuse database, which you have to be able to have in order to be able to do the work of the Ombudsman. So we had a back and forth for quite some time. We ended up suing to get access to it, and the judge ordered mediation. We reached a solution on that. That was with the understanding that we would then go to the General Assembly and ask for legislation to permanently fix this problem, which we have done, and it has now passed. So that is great news for the public that we now, the Ombudsman's office, now has access without being turned off to this database that is essential for the Ombudsman work.
It was a tough situation, but many of those kids being kept in state office buildings and so forth, we found out through that process. Right?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. So that was the first, I think, significant report that came from the Ombudsman's office. And I know we'd all been hearing about the possibility of children, foster children, sleeping in office buildings. We thought it was mostly located in Louisville. It turns out it's all over the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And it turns out it's ongoing, and it's all ranges of ages and all types of situations of foster children. So it's a very, very sad and very serious situation. That was a result of the Ombudsman getting access to the iTwist database. So it shows how important it is for the Ombudsman to have access to information to be able to redress wrongs.
We were led to believe it was only very difficult to place children who were in that situation. Is that your finding?
So that's not the finding. That's what I was led to believe too, and that was one reason why we wanted to really look into it to find out, okay, what is going on? So it was a very short preliminary investigation. It was about a 4-month period of time last year, August, July, it was summertime until October. And during that period of time, they found that there were 49 children that were placed in office buildings to sleep overnight. The youngest children were 1, 2, and 3. So you had some very, very young children. Average age was 13, so you did have older children as well. So you had a full gambit. About 19 were girls, the rest were boys. Some children had no additional notations showing that they had violence or psychological issues. They were just children that didn't have any records of any kind of issues that would result in higher monitoring requirements. So yeah, it's deeply sad, and it's troubling. It's exactly the reason why the Ombudsman exists, is to be able to look into information so there can be changes. And
that's an ongoing process now?
That is an ongoing process. So once that preliminary assessment came out, that was just telling us what is the lie of the land. And then the Ombudsman is now doing a more thorough investigation to find out, okay, well, what's happening with these kids while they're in the office buildings? What are the policies in place that govern whether or not they go there? It actually raised a lot more questions than it answered, and that's what this deeper investigation is going to look into.
All right, your office has offered to hold trainings for local officials who want to do the right thing, but are not always sure of how they can comply and get a clean audit. What kinds of things do you prioritize in those sessions, and are people taking part?
So I'm very proud of that, and I believe that's going to make a big difference throughout Kentucky, because we have a lot of good elected officials, a lot of good public servants who want to do the right thing, they just don't know how. And that's where we can come in to do a better partnership with them. So we've started doing trainings with KCO, which it brings up a lot of county officials in a lot of different areas together, and we're having good participation. I expect it to increase and for us to get even better as we find out what they need to know and what we need to tell them. I think our first review with them was the top 10 mistakes. You can start there. It's an easy list to begin with, and I've done that too when I've spoken to different elected officials. I've said, okay, these are low-hanging fruit. These are easy mistakes that people make. If you fix these things, you're going to deal with a lot of your problems.
And you're getting good participation.
Yes, we are.
Yep. All right, the city of Frankfort has indicated it has some financial concerns right now, and some of that is due to remote work, where employees are paying the occupational taxes where they live, not where their job may be based. Is there advice for, a locality like that dealing with that kind of situation?
So that's a great question. I think that has more to do with the telework systems that are in place for state government, because many people in Frankfort are state government workers. Many of them are pursuing telework, and they end up living in Louisville or Lexington, and they pay their taxes that way. So it does have an impact on Frankfort. It's not necessarily something that we've weighed in on. It is something that I'm aware of because it impacts everybody who works in state government who has telework options. We have a lot of field staff that are out in different places in the state, and that's just the way our office works, because we have auditors who have to live in Western Kentucky or Eastern Kentucky, and that impacts things like the city of Frankfort.
How challenging is it for you to function as an independent auditor while being elected in a partisan contest and as one who likely has future political plans?
Well, it's a good question. I was a prosecutor for 4 years, and the kind of calculation that goes into being a prosecutor is exactly the same that goes into being an elected state auditor. You have to ask yourself, can you be fair and make sure you remove any kind of bias as you're looking into things? So I did that when I was a prosecutor in a small town where I knew a lot of people. And I had to ask myself those questions before I ran for office, and I really try to keep a gauge on that myself, making sure I'm being fair. I only say something when the facts warrant it. I do have a very great and heavy responsibility to make sure there's accountability and transparency. So I have to make sure that I'm letting the public know what's really going on, and that it's always based on facts.
There is an open U.S. Senate seat in Kentucky next year with Senator Mitch McConnell deciding he will not run again. Do you have any interest in that, or have you chosen a candidate to support?
That's a great question. So the field remains to be set. I think we only have one announced candidate on the Republican side. I believe we might have one on the Democrat side. Anytime something like that opens up, you look at it, and I always look at things like that, and very prayerful, and it's a family decision, and we talk about things. I love what I'm doing. It is incredibly meaningful. Not to say that the United States Senate isn't meaningful. It is, obviously. But there's a lot of great work that happens here in Kentucky, too, and I love being somebody who runs an office as opposed to just voting. I'm running an office, and I'm getting some good work done. So, I'm not saying no, because you always think about that when there's an opening, but there's some candidates that are going to be jumping in, and we'll see how the field lays out. And at the meantime, right now, I love the job that I'm doing.
But you'd be open to a discussion maybe about the Senate seat?
I would always be open to a discussion. I've had several people reach out to me and ask me, hey, would you be interested in this? And we'd love to support you. And sometimes people think it's great to have a woman in the race. There's a lot of good reasons to be looking at it. But for right now, at this moment right now, and it's a ways off, I love the job that I'm doing.
All right. Thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Allison Ball, the Kentucky State Auditor. We're coming back on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers in a moment. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers. This is a huge weekend for Lexington and for basketball fans. This coming week, the boys' Sweet 16 high school tournament will be in town, and right after the basketball champions are crowned, it will be time for the Keeneland Spring Meet. Mary Quinn Raymer is president of VisitLEX, and she is joining us during a busy time, and we appreciate that very much. Thanks for coming.
It's always my pleasure to be here.
This has to be a very lucrative stretch for Lexington, right? What kind of impact does all of this basketball action have on the community?
Well, it has significant impact. We have been really fortunate between NCAA, KHSAA, and then rolling right into the spring meet at Keeneland. We've just got several weeks of back-to-back sports fans and enthusiasts descending on our city in the best kind of way, and we're really excited. We think all told, by the time you add up the basketball tournaments, we'll be looking at well north of $10 million in local economic impact, which is significant, not only for us as a city, but also for these respective small businesses, restaurants, shops, transportation companies, hotels, of course, that benefit from having all these visitors.
The overnight stays have to bring the most revenue, right? So you hope for people to come and stay and see some other things.
Absolutely. We love for people to come in for basketball, come in for racing, and then of course take in any of the number of our wonderful attractions. Obviously things like the Kentucky Horse Park, our different bourbon distilleries that are found along the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, some wonderful history that's available for folks who are visiting Mary Todd Lincoln, Ashland, Waveland, all of these wonderful historic treasures. And so we think we have a little something for everybody, no matter what your taste is, and we'd love to encourage folks to extend that stay and take in more than just a basketball game or a race.
Do you try to reach them ahead of time and let them know all that Lexington has to offer, or is it once they're here, it's like, okay, now let's show you around?
So it's a little bit of both. When we have something on the calendar every year like Keeneland, it's a little easier to work in advance and to give them all the reasons to package a good long weekend here in the Bluegrass. In the case of basketball, oftentimes we're not really sure which teams are coming in to play until very close to tournament time, and so that is something where we really try and make ourselves present and available as they get into our city and equip them with all the information that they need to make the most of their stay.
We got a pretty good list of teams for this
Yes.
part of the NCAA, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Absolutely. We couldn't have asked for a much better, I don't think, in terms of just fan enthusiasm and national interest in the teams. And it's just really, it's exciting. I've told several people it's palpable, the sports and interest and enthusiasm around the city.
The boys' Sweet 16 will bring fans from all over the state, and
Yes.
that's always fun. Sort of a great reunion of basketball fans.
There's no doubt about it. It's a beloved tradition. Of course, it's a great thrill for these players to have the opportunity to play on such a signature court as that you find in Rupp Arena. And so it's really wonderful to be able to welcome these fans and their families and these players in, and it's something that we look forward to every single year. At the end of March, it's sort of the capstone to a great month for us.
Years ago, there was a Companies Coming theme.
Yes.
in Lexington. You remember that?
I do, actually.
Growing up, probably.
That's been a few years,
It
but yeah.
has, yeah. and that was to encourage locals to, welcome visitors to town, to be out there and be good guides if there's that opportunity, or at least be very hospitable. Do we still do that well?
We do it extremely well. As a matter of fact, we are known really far and wide for the signature hospitality that we offer to visitors who are in our city. And I take great pride in that. People are so genuinely friendly. They want folks to have a good time. They want to help connect them with the things that they think will be of most interest. And we couldn't do it without them. It's so important, the fact that we have all of these local ambassadors that really do help talk about Lexington, and then of course as folks are in town and meeting visitors, that they help share the goodness that we all know and love in our city.
How important is tourism as an economic driver in Lexington?
One of my favorite questions. It's a huge driver. It's significant. So it's about a $14 billion impact around the state. And here in Lexington, specifically, we're responsible for about $1.6 billion of that. If you take Lexington and contiguous counties, it's about a $2 billion economic impact that's coming out of central Kentucky. In addition to the economic side of it, it employs thousands of people. So we've got about 90,000 employees in the hospitality space statewide, and about 15,000 here in Lexington. And so these are meaningful jobs, rewarding careers, and great opportunities for people who are working their way up to join the industry and have a great experience.
Keeneland Spring Meet is coming in April. How do you encourage people to make the most of their trip to that historic racetrack?
So we have some fantastic guides on VisitLEX.com, and Keeneland also has some great suggestions for how to make the most of that trip. You will not find a finer racetrack in this country. I've had the privilege of going to many, and we are just so very lucky with Keeneland in our backyard. So I would say to plan your day and then take advantage, certainly, of the other things to do around the Keeneland experience itself. So making restaurant reservations and getting out there and seeing some of our other attractions. I would say, though, however, on the restaurant and bourbon distillery tours, make sure you have those reservations and book early so that you're not scrambling at the last minute.
As you reach out around the country and you talk about conventions, or you talk about coming to Lexington
Yes.
for visits, does the area sell itself?
So the area sells itself if I can get someone to come see it with their own eyes. Of course, the travel space is so very competitive, and everybody's out there trying to get attention. So we have to be pretty clever with our marketing and the way that we present the city, but it doesn't take long at all. If I can get someone to come on a site visit for a convention or I can get them to come in for a weekend trip. Almost immediately they fall in love. They are so totally surprised, thrilled, delighted, and are very much those ambassadors that then go home and tell their family and friends that they have to put Lexington on their list.
Which is what you want, extra sales people out there.
I'll take it all day long.
Lexington continues to celebrate its 250th anniversary. There are events going on and themes each month. That's an exciting time. Is that also bringing additional visitors in?
Yes, well, of course, the winter months are a little harder for us just because we lend ourselves to the warmer months as far as our attractions and the types of activities that we have around the city. But I'm so excited headed into April. There is just a fantastic lineup. April is literary and music month, so we've got so many cool things happening around the city. And then I've got my eyes particularly on June. That is Come Home Month. That is when we are asking family and folks here in Lexington to invite their friends and their family to come visit. There is a great lineup literally every single weekend of activities in June, some very cool signature events, and then mainstays in our June calendar like Railbird, Soul Feast, Pride. And so we want to take all this collective energy and say, hey, take that conversation out of your group chat and actually book the trip to Lexington already. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. You'll start to see a lot of messaging around that.
Check that on your bucket list. Right?
Absolutely.
Get to Lexington. Thank you, Mary. We appreciate you coming in.
It's always my pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
Everybody, we'll be back in just a moment, and we'll wrap up Kentucky Newsmakers. Stay with us. We do appreciate you being along for Kentucky Newsmakers. We have scheduled the Senate President Robert Stivers for Kentucky Newsmakers. We've had to reschedule him a couple of times and hoping to have him on next week's edition. We'll talk about the 2025 session. That's Kentucky Newsmakers for this week, and you make it a good week ahead.